KMSU.
Hi, I'm looking for Dustin, please.
This is Dustin. How are you doing?
How are you today?
I am excellent. Thanks for calling us.
It's my pleasure. You know that.
I'm here with my co-host, Ton.
Hey there, how you doing?
Ton, happy birthday.
Thank you.
There you go.
That's awesome.
Well, there you go, brother. My pleasure.
Wow, that's great. That's very unexpected and lovely.
Well, a little birdie called the internet told me, so, it's not that I'm a genius or anything.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, man.
My pleasure. And Ton, I want you to know that was my nickname, but probably not the same as yours because I was heavy, so that's why they called me Ton.
Yep. 2,000
Is that why
pounds.
they call you Ton? Really?
Yeah, I've been a pretty chubby kid most of my life, yeah.
I'm going to come out to Minnesota and smack some people around then for you.
Well, the real reason is Dusty's the only one that started calling me Ton, but my name is Justin, and it's spelled Juston. And as soon as he saw that, that's what really spawned it.
Well, the first person I have to smack is your mother for misspelling it. But aside from that, I understand. I understand why he calls you that.
Awesome. Well, we have a few questions for you.
Bring it on, whatever you like. I am here for you.
All right, well, we'll start off and ask you how you got started acting.
I got started like anybody else in school. I was sixth grade. I was in the Pirates of Penzance, and then in ninth grade, I was in a show called Annie Get Your Gun up in New Rochelle, where I went to junior high school, and that started, kind of a lifelong love of doing plays and comedy. I also found out that not being a pretty man, well, not back then at least, and not being an athlete, if you made the girls laugh, they liked you. So hence became my comedy career. And once I got to high school, then it was less about girls and more about, the freedom to express oneself. And I found plays in a drama workshop, and I started doing stand-up, even locally with a partner in high school. We performed at the senior prom, and we performed at a concert that was held for the Blues Project, and we would go, wherever they would hire us or not hire us and just let us do our stuff. And college, that begat college and an acting degree, and I was in show business.
Sounds pretty cool. Sounds like you started working, so to speak, very early rather than doing all the schooling and then doing that, huh? You were actually actively out there.
Well, I got lucky. I wound up doing a voiceover when I was like 17 up in New Rochelle with Frances Sternhagen, who was just an amazing actress. Look her up. She was in Driving Miss Daisy and 100 other things. And even in college, 90 of my 128 credits were in theater. We were on stage all the time. And so it really was a place to, as my old coach used to say, fail gloriously, get up there and do the work. And I had met another comedy partner and started doing that. And I just was getting a lot of stage experience. And when I got to New York, I found a group called the First Amendment Improv Company, and I was one of the first people to come out of their classes there and get to the stage. And at that time, I met a man named Jim Brownell, who became my partner on WPLJ with the morning comedy team on Jim Kerr's show for, 1979 to 1981. And so I've been really fortunate in the fact that for a man that doesn't have a job, I seem to work a lot.
How did you then get into doing movies like you ended up doing Sorority House Massacre or Part 2 and that sort of thing? How did that come to be and what was that like?
89, I finally moved out to California. My marriage was failing. I had was teaching college, and the administration had changed. And basically, I went, here I am in my early 30s, and I hadn't had my film and TV career. So I left everything I knew and went from New York to Los Angeles. And through a friend, I got a manager early on that sent me on to this audition over at New Horizon Studios. And for a film I didn't know, he said it's a horror film, and I want to send you in on this. I think you'd be right for this. And I went up there, and it was 24 beautiful women in the lobby and me. And I thought, God, I love show business, And I went in and met Julie Corman, Roger Corman's wife, and Jimmy Wynorski, and it was for Sorority House Massacre 2. And I looked at the script. The first thing I said, I love your James Bond reference. And he goes, what? I go, Ketchum, Orville Ketchum. I said, it's about as Bond as you can get. And I did the audition, and before I got back to my manager's office, they had offered me the job, and it was the beginning of my career in California. Now, I went on to do 32 films with Jim, a dozen with Jim, and 20 with Fred Olin Ray in over about a 10, 15-year period, but a whole mess of them was about 20 films within 5 years. And basically, you know, for a stage actor and comic, I started working in film and cutting my teeth on that, and it reminded me more than anything else of the theater companies I had been with. It was a family of people. You know, it's guerrilla filmmaking. You're doing 50 setups a day. There's no time for anything but to know your lines, get it right, moving on, next setup, you know, and it became just this really, really wonderful experience that, you know, I'm at 58, still the same schmuck that I was when I was 16 doing comedy and film. You know, little did I know that if the bus hits me tomorrow, it would say, B-movie actor Peter Spellos died today. And, you know, I did all these great films with Jim and Fred, and it's a legacy, you know, in a sense that I was part of something much bigger than me, working with people who, you know, had been in the movie industry and that did, you know, a lot of stuff with Ed Wood and people like that. So it was, I fell into it, gents, and I'm grateful to this day.
Now, with doing all those films with Jim Wynorski, what would you say would be your favorite one that you've done with him?
Well, that's really hard because there's something about Orville that's just, there's a little bit of Orville in every one of us, you know, just a retired maniac who's really not a maniac and you know, eats raw meat and works in a building somewhere. And those were such great fun. I mean, the Sorority House Massacre was done on 7 days, basically on a bet with Roger Corman that Jim made that he said, I could do a film. Roger was going on vacation and said, I can do a movie on your existing sets in 7 days. And for about $100,000, we did Sorority House Massacre 2, and it was great, great fun. But my very, very favorite, I think, would have to be Dinosaur Island, because it was the first film I did with Fred Olin Ray. Freddie and Jimmy directed it together. I met Richard Gabay on that film, who's another wonderful director I went on to work with, and a good friend I just saw in New York a couple weeks ago, Tom Schell, and the beautiful and amazing Michelle Bauer. By the way, my first and only screen kiss was with Michelle Bauer. So to this day, her husband's still pissed at me, but that's a whole other story.
Well, do you feel, you're saying, you know, you're doing these movies in just a week's time, or do you feel like today's film landscape is kind of different than it was? I mean, with those B movies in the 80s and 90s, do you think it's...
Oh, absolutely, my friend. What I feel anyway, that, you know, show business is, you know, and I don't want to sound like Milton Berle, you know, it's different when I was young. You had places to fail and succeed. You had a lot more stuff that you could do, and people were, you know, I don't know if it was more accepting of things that were not mainstream, but I've never been mainstream, be it on film or in my comedy. So I just think there's less chances today. Everybody is so hung up on success and what that means to them and having to do the right thing. Well, you know, the right thing to me is doing what you love, you know. So I don't know if I could start out at, you know, 20 again. I was living in New York as a 20-year-old, paying $150 a month for an apartment I could live off on unemployment. I was in New York City being an actor, and then in California, it was the early 90s, and there was these great, you know, erotic thrillers and exploitation films, B movies, whatever you want to call them. They were where the film was getting done. I mean, so many more films go straight to video and have a great following than, you know, than the big movies. Hell, I like The Avengers and The Dark Knight Rises, but that only makes millionaires of people. It doesn't make, you know, actors. That's what you get when you're, you know, when you're big. But the real people working are the people like Fred and Jimmy, who are filmmakers, who've been filmmakers since I was the same age I was an actor. I mean, we grew up in New York, and Jim and I used to watch the same thing. It was a super adventure theater with Claude Kirshner and Clowney, and it played scary movies on Saturday morning. And then, you know, 30 years later, I find myself working in Bronson Caves, where they, you know, they shot many a Corman film, and the Batcave was, and you know, all of a sudden you're living Hollywood rather than dreaming about it. So I was really lucky, and I think back then it was a little easier. You had a lot of talented people too, you know, that I worked with, both cast and crews. You know, it was like guerrilla filmmaking. We knew what to do. We knew we had a lot of work to be done, and we laughed all day doing it.
Now, you mentioned you also worked on some TV, and you've been on some pretty popular television shows, right?
I've been really lucky that way. You know, I got to be 3 seasons on American Dreams on NBC, which was the show I swear to you boys, that had the most heart since the newsroom. You know, it really cared about, and it was the time I grew up in. You know, I got to be the curmudgeon director of American Bandstand. You know, American Bandstand was the first, you know, people to put black music into the mainstream. I mean, Dick Clark was not just a New Year's Eve host, but he was an innovator, and he went out on a limb. And to be a part of that history and then to comment on history, I mean, it's been amazing. But I've been able to work. You know, I've done as many, probably more, you know, mainstream stuff as I have B movies. I got to. I like to tell people I've been seduced by Sigourney Weaver. I've been neuralized by Agent J. I've been interrogated by Detective Sifowitz and Perry Mason, and I turned into Freddy Krueger. You know, how much of a fun life is that? But American Dreams is by far one of the greatest shows I thought was on television, and died a sad death after 3 seasons because we couldn't beat the numbers of, you know, extreme suburban makeovers or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of similar to what you were talking about before with the movies. It's like, for guys like us growing up, a movie that you made in a week for, you know, $100,000 had much more of an impact on us than some $100 million film that was probably more popular in the mainstream. But
well, yeah, sure, and you know, you can see a film like, you know, Sorority House Massacre or Hard to Die, you know, and go, well, hell, I can do this. You know, I got a great eye. I know some people with lights and sound, you know, and all of a sudden it would inspire other filmmakers. You know, how many filmmakers were inspired by, you know, The Dark Knight Rises? Probably not a lot, and the same with the Avengers. I mean, people love to see it, but they're not going, well, I can do that. I can do a $400 million movie, you know. But
right,
you know, the prospects of doing one for $100,000, $200,000, it's pretty. You know, with Kickstarter and all this stuff today, you can do this stuff, and hopefully it's somewhat as enjoyable as it was when I was doing it.
Well, can we back up a little bit? One of our favorite roles of yours was, as you mentioned, when you were in Freddy's Dead and transformed into Freddy Krueger. Can you tell us a little bit about working on that movie?
It was pretty amazing because, you know, we're talking Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. You know, this could be the 5 iconic villains, killers of you know, cinematic dumb, for want of a better word. I did the audition. It was really dark because, as you know, I played the girl Tracy's abusive father, and, you know, no honey for daddy kind of thing. And it was, I did the audition, and Rachel Talalay, who's the director, who went on to do A Tank Girl and stuff like that, it was silent after the audition, which usually is a good thing. And she said to me, and she goes, it was terrific. And I go, I got to tell you, I don't know whether to say thank you or not. You know, it's a pretty dark place. Well, little did I know, I got to the set, and then they had me in prosthetic makeup. I had to do a complete head cast, which was great. I had done, that was my first one before I did the Men in Black stuff. But I got to, you know, be in the makeup chair, and I'm literally had 3 guys. It took about 3.5 hours to apply that prosthetic. Now they had a documentary crew on set, you know, for whatever reason, and I'm sitting in a makeup chair, and Robert Englund comes by, says hello. He's in full Freddy regalia, you know, and we're sitting there, and there's a kind of a food spread in the room. And if you can imagine, Freddy Krueger with his long, sharp fingernails, kind of fingering through the donuts, going, "Hey, does anybody have a cruller? I could really use a cruller right now." And I thought, I said, I'm never going to forget this moment. Freddy fingering the donuts, looking for some, you know, Savillon in his donut. But, you know, it was really, really funny. Get to the set, and no one wants to talk to me. I mean, they kind of kept me sequestered because they didn't want Tracy to see me, and she definitely didn't want to talk. And it was, just, you know, kind of a creepy, not kind of, it was a really creepy scene. You know, aside from the fact that she beats me senseless with a coffee pot. And then, you know, I turned into Freddy. It was just an amazing experience. But I'm going to jump ahead in the story. You know, so I did it. It was great. You know, it became an icon. I was in the book, the Freddy's Dead book. You know, I showed up in a couple of different places because they took pictures of me in makeup. Going to an audition one day, it must be, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, and I'm in the elevator. I come in, I'm in a sport jacket. I walk in, and there's a pretty young woman, you know, dressed for an audition in there. We're going up to whatever the umpteenth floor, and she, you know, we kind of look at each other and smile and nod, and look back at each other, smile and nod. And she goes, "This may be strange, but do I know you?" And I said, I don't want this to sound like a line either, but I really think we've met somewhere. And we're looking at each other, and then she goes, "Oh my God, you're my abusive father." And it's Leslie Dean, the actor who played, Tracy in the movie, and we, hugged in the elevator like abusive father and daughter would never do, and had a great laugh about it. And how's your career and how's things going on? And we went to our separate auditions, and I just went once again. I love show business.
That's awesome.
I said, only in show business can I not have children and be called an abusive father and get a hug for it. Very strange. And very true. So, again, I'm a pretty lucky boy at this point in my life to still being able to do things that I love to do.
Well, one thing that maybe people might not realize, but with your voiceover work that you do for a lot of anime, I mean, you've been in Ghost in the Shell and Cowboy Bebop and a lot of these huge anime films. I mean, that's kind of like almost a separate career that you have going on.
It really was. It was another thing that I fell into. I was doing a TV show back then called the FBI: The Untold Stories, which was sort of like a dramatization of real stuff that had happened, and not like Unsolved Mysteries, which I went on and did at a later date. I get a call from a buddy of mine. I'm on the set. He says, "Can you make an audition this afternoon?" I said, "No, I'm actually shooting." He said, "Well, there's a role in this TV show called Space Strikers that is really perfect for you. Would you call the director now and audition over the phone?" I said, "Sure." So I'm having lunch on the set. I literally pull a paper plate out of the garbage and a pen, and I speak to the director, and he tells me the lines, and I write it down, and he says, "Perfect, you're hired. Come in tonight after your shoot." And I walk in the room, and it was, this amazing group of people, including one of my dear friends, and I had no idea that this was a recurring role. I did the scene, and I wound up doing, like 13 of the 26 episodes for a show called Space Strikers on Fox Kids, where I played a creature called Admiral Malco. And I got to say one of the greatest lines you can ever say in science fiction: "Set a course for Earth," And that begat Battletech, where I played Major Hawkins, and all of a sudden I had a voiceover career. Now, a lot of these guys had been doing voiceovers and dubbing for years, and I was just lucky to fall into it. I have a kind of a deep voice, and not like when I had when I was a kid, but I got working, and it was great. And from that, I got some great stuff, a lot of anime, and like you said, Ghost in the Shell. We did Metropolis. If you look at the movie Metropolis, 3 of us did all the character voices and all the crowd scenes that they triple and quadruple, recorded over. 3 guys, all the voices. Not the leads, but everybody else. So those were some great experiences. And then, luck of the draw, I became a Transformer, and got to do the comic villain Skybite, which to this day is my favorite, really, really my favorite thing that I've ever done on for voiceovers.
Wow.
One thing that's interesting that we found, looking at all the stuff you've done, you seem to use a lot of pseudonyms for different roles and different jobs that you have. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, I'm going to plead the fifth because I may incriminate myself there. Perhaps off recording, I'll explain some things to you, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Gotcha. We must have misread that then someplace.
Yeah, must have been some other guy named G. Gordon Bear. I have no idea who he is.
Right, okay.
He seems to get a lot of my work.
Well, sorry about that. That's...
No problem. That's, if again, we'll talk at a later date. It's just, I got lucky. Sometimes you work on a project where you're proud of, and sometimes you work on something where, like, I'm, just going to not put my name, and you do it because it's what we do.
Sure.
At this point, I don't care about recognition. I don't care about anything else than, getting a chance to go out there and touch people, whether it's on film or on stage. And stuff I'm doing right now is, most of my work on stage now is for charity in New York. So that's going to be the next part, or the longest next part of my life.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. What are you doing currently?
Well, I moved to New York after 23 years in Los Angeles. I got no problem with, telling your listeners that I was in a couple accidents and hurt my back, and I was literally, after 3.5 years, I had a prescription painkiller dependency that was really difficult to get rid of, and I found the doctor in Arizona on my way back home because my mom was also ill. I was coming back home. She's 91 to help take care of her, and was able to lick that problem and basically regain my life back, which was wonderful because there was a couple of years there where I was just addled with pain and painkillers. And it's not, kids, if you're listening at home, flush them down the toilet because they're just no good. And believe me, I did more than you can ever dream of. So I came back home, and the minute I got well, I started to do what I was doing in California before I got sick, which was created a company called the New Mercury Theater, which is a community of actors dedicated to the community. I'm trying to get actors to kind of look beyond their career and challenge them to what they can do in the 21st century as a performer. What is your commitment and what to the community, to the planet, to your neighborhood, to your country, whatever strikes your fancy, but not your own career. You got to go out there and help people who need help. And believe me, I was one of those folks for a while. So we did it in California. We raised about $4,000 for 4 different charities. I wound up cooking for 80 homeless women at the Downtown Women's Shelter in Los Angeles, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then when I got well here in New York, I went, you know what? I'm going to put the New York version together. So that's what I'm in the midst of right now. I have a couple charities because a dear friend of mine suffers from schizophrenia since high school, and we only recently found him again. And so I'm doing work for the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. We're going to be doing shows for Mitchell Manor, which is a home out on Mitchell Field here on an old air base that takes care of soldiers and their families who are coming back from war, who have somebody MIA, who can't get a job and a start. We spoke about working with a group called Gallant Few, which also finds job placements for people in the military who've come back from war. A thing called the Deborah Foundation, which is a terrible childhood disease. Again, I'm looking to do staged readings, improv shows, stand-ups. I got a cadre of performers that I'm challenging to come help the people who need help. We're going to do a benefit for the Food Bank of Westchester here where I am. So I want to do shows that, are beyond my own career. I'll work again, I'm just starting back to get contacted with the people in New York. I'm a 58-year-old rookie in my hometown. It's very bizarre, As Tom Waits used to say, everybody I used to know is either dead or in prison, So it's reacquainting myself with an industry that knows me on film or TV but doesn't know me in person. So I like the fact that I get to start over again. Reinventing yourself is a great thing, gents. You really do get a second chance, and no matter what George S. Kaufman says, you can go home again. So just remember that.
Awesome.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on getting clean. I'm glad you're doing well and trying to do some things in your life. That's excellent.
Thank you very much. As you travel the path that is your life, you realize what's important to you, and that when we're kids, they said life gets easier when you get older. They lied to us. Life gets simpler when we get older. It's never easy. It's not easy now, but it sure is simple. You decide what you want to do. Like you gents got a great radio show and you're doing what you love, I assure you. And in 30 years, I hope you're doing the same thing, making a little more money, but doing the same thing.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, again, we want to thank you for taking some time out with us today. It's been awesome.
Well, maybe I can call you Dust Ton. Sort of like, Brangelina, you can kind of have your own one name in the industry, And I know it's going to catch on at the station now, but it was it was my pleasure. And do me a favor, whenever you get a link to this that I can send to all those Orville Ketchum fans out there, just let me know. And if I can do anything for you guys in the future, I've already liked you on Facebook, and your presence on the way, Ton. I just don't know what it is yet.
Man, thanks, man.
But I'll make sure she's cute for you, whatever it is. Don't you worry.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Best to you and best to all your listeners out there.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.